Picture this. A pregnant woman collapses on a cold marble floor, blood spreading beneath her. Her husband of 3 years looks down at her, checks his watch, and says, "Call an ambulance if you want. I have a dinner reservation." Then he steps around her bleeding body like she is nothing more than an obstacle in his path. His mistress is wearing her robe. Her bank accounts are frozen. Her insurance is canceled. And within hours, fake psychiatric records will paint her as mentally unstable, giving him grounds to take her baby the moment it is born. She has no money, no home, no friends, because the woman she trusted most was a paid spy all along. But here is what her husband does not know. The woman he just threw away like garbage, she is not a nobody. She walked away from a $20 billion fortune 7 years ago to live a normal life. She changed her name, she disappeared, and she has two billionaire brothers who have been waiting for her call. What happens next will destroy everything her husband built. His empire, his reputation, his freedom. But the path to justice is not easy. There will be moments when all hope seems lost. Moments when the villain appears to win. Moments that will make your heart pound and your blood boil. This is a story of betrayal, survival, and the unbreakable bond of family. And so the story ends. Not with revenge, but with redemption. Not with destruction, but with healing. If you stayed until now, something in this journey must have touched your heart. Here's the lesson Evelyn's story teaches us. Asking for help is not weakness. It is strength. Pride can become a prison, and the people who truly love us never stop waiting for us to come home. No matter how dark things get, no matter how alone you feel, you are never truly without hope. Sometimes, the family we pushed away is still standing in the shadows, ready to catch us when we fall. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your own life who would fight for you, then do me a small favor, hit that like button. It tells me this kind of story matters to you. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in Evelyn's situation? Would you have called your family sooner, or would pride have held you back too? Share this with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. And if you have not already, subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you stories like this one. Stories of strength, stories of survival, stories that remind us what it means to be human. The marble floor of the Carlisle residence's lobby felt like ice through Evelyn's thin flats. It was 9:07 on an October evening, and Manhattan had already surrendered to the early darkness of autumn. The golden lights overhead cast everything in a warm glow that felt almost mocking now, designed to make residents feel safe and important and wealthy. Evelyn Morgan Hayes was none of those things anymore. Not since 3 minutes ago. She stood near the elevator bank, one hand gripping the strap of her handbag, the other pressed protectively against her 8-month pregnant belly. Her breathing was shallow, careful, the way she had learned to breathe when she did not want anyone to see her panic. The baby had been restless all evening, kicking and shifting, as if sensing what was about to happen. Babies knew things. Her mother had told her that once, years ago, before the plane crash that took both her parents and shattered everything Evelyn thought she understood about family and love and safety. George, the doorman who had smiled at her every morning for 3 years, would not meet her eyes. He stood behind his desk, pretending to organize papers that did not need organizing, his shoulders hunched like a man trying to make himself smaller. The security guard who had stopped her at the elevator was new. Young, probably did not even know what he was participating in. "Ma'am," he said again, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and discomfort that came from following orders he did not fully understand. "I'm sorry, but you're not on the authorized resident list. It was updated this afternoon." "I live here." Evelyn said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant, like it belonged to someone else. I've lived here for 3 years. I'm Evelyn Whitmore. My husband is Richard Whitmore III. The guard's expression flickered with something that might have been pity. Ma'am, I have my instructions. If you could just wait in the lobby, someone will be down to speak with you. Before Evelyn could respond, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime that she had heard thousands of times before. A sound that used to mean home. A sound that now meant something else entirely. Richard stepped out first, confident as always in his tailored wool coat, his silver cufflinks catching the light, his posture radiating the easy arrogance of a man who had never been told no in his entire 44 years of life. Third-generation wealth did that to people. It made them believe the world was arranged for their convenience. Evelyn had loved that confidence once. She had mistaken it for strength. Right beside him was Tiffany Banks. The woman was 28 years old, with 2 million Instagram followers and a smile that could sell anything to anyone. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless even at this hour, and she was wearing Evelyn's favorite silk robe, the pale blue one with the delicate embroidery, the one Richard had given her for their anniversary. Tiffany's manicured hand rested lightly on Richard's arm, exactly where Evelyn's hand used to be, possessive, comfortable, like she belonged there. Evelyn, Richard's voice was calm, almost pleasant, the way it always was when he was about to do something cruel. He had learned early that rage was messy and unpredictable. Calm was far more devastating. I hoped we could do this privately, but you insisted on making a scene. Making a scene? Evelyn heard her own voice rise and hated herself for it. Richard, what is this? What's happening? He sighed, the sound of a patient man dealing with a difficult child. This arrangement isn't working anymore. It hasn't for a long time. I've had your things packed. He gestured toward a single suitcase that a guard was wheeling across the lobby toward her. You can take what's in there. Everything else belongs to the apartment. 3 years of marriage, condensed into one suitcase. Evelyn looked around the lobby, suddenly aware of their audience. The night concierge, pretending to study his computer screen. 2 residents waiting for elevators, their expensive shoes pointed firmly toward the doors, their faces carefully blank. A delivery person frozen near the mailboxes, package still in hand. Everyone was watching. No one was helping. Richard, she said, and she hated how her voice cracked on his name. I'm 8 months pregnant. With your child. It's cold outside. At least let me come upstairs and talk about this like adults. Tiffany spoke then, her voice dripping with sympathy so false it curdled in the air. Evelyn, honey, stress isn't good for the baby. You need to think about what's best for that little one, not just yourself. Something snapped in Evelyn's chest. Who the hell do you think you are? Richard's expression hardened. She's the mother of my first child, the one that will carry the Whitmore name, not a placeholder. The word hit her like a physical blow. Placeholder. That was what she had been to him, all this time, a placeholder until someone better came along. Her phone buzzed in her purse. Then again, then continuously, notification after notification cascading like dominoes falling. She pulled it out with trembling hands and watched her world collapse in real time. Bank alert, transaction declined, insufficient funds. Bank alert, account access suspended. Contact your financial institution. Email notification. Your health insurance coverage has been terminated, effective immediately. You froze my accounts? Her voice was barely a whisper now. Richard, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I need prenatal care. The baby needs... You need to sign the papers my lawyer sent this afternoon, Richard interrupted, stepping closer, his voice dropping low so only she could hear. You have 48 hours. Sign quietly, you get $50,000 and we never speak again. Fight me? He paused, letting the threat settle. I will take that baby and you will never see it again. I have documentation of your mental instability, Evelyn. Years of it. That documentation is fake. You fabricated. Prove it. The two words hung in the air between them, and Evelyn realized with sudden, terrible clarity that she could not prove it. She had no money, no insurance, no friends who were truly hers, she understood now. Everything in her life had been arranged by Richard, controlled by Richard, owned by Richard. She had walked into a trap 3 years ago and never even noticed the bars closing around her. The stress, the shock, the cold October air seeping through the lobby doors. It was all too much. She felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen, different from the baby's usual movements. Sharper, more urgent, then warmth spreading down her legs. She was bleeding. Evelyn collapsed to her knees on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the lobby like a gunshot. Her hands pressed against her belly, trying to protect the life inside her, trying to hold everything together, even as everything fell apart. For one horrifying moment, everyone froze. Then Richard did something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. He looked at his watch. "Call an ambulance if you want," he said. "I have a dinner reservation." He took Tiffany's hand and walked toward the revolving doors. And as he passed his bleeding, pregnant wife, he did not step over her. He stepped around her, like she was an obstacle, an inconvenience, a piece of furniture that had been left in an awkward place. The door closed behind them, and Evelyn was alone on the cold marble floor, surrounded by strangers who did not want to get involved, bleeding and terrified and utterly, completely abandoned. George finally moved. He was calling 911, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. "Stay with me, Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice cracking. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." But Evelyn was staring at the elevator, at the gilded doors that led up to the penthouse she had called home, at the life she thought she had built, rising up and away without her. "Is my baby okay?" she whispered. George did not answer. He did not know. And somewhere in the back of her mind, beneath the pain and the fear and the crushing weight of betrayal, Evelyn Morgan Hayes made a decision. She was not going to die on this floor, and she was not going to let Richard Whitmore win. The emergency room at St. Vincent's was a blur of harsh lights and beeping machines and the sharp smell of antiseptic. Evelyn drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of conversations that seemed to happen around her rather than to her. Placental abruption scare. Bleeding has stopped. Baby's heartbeat is strong. Insurance terminated. That last phrase pulled her back to full awareness. She opened her eyes to find a young doctor standing over her, clipboard in hand, expression carefully neutral in the way medical professionals learned to be neutral when delivering bad news. "Mrs. Hayes?" the doctor said. "Whitmore," Evelyn corrected, automatically, then stopped. She had given her maiden name at intake. Why had she done that? Because some part of her had already known, she realized. Some part of her had understood that Evelyn Whitmore no longer existed. That name had been stripped from her along with everything else. "Your intake form says Hayes," the doctor continued. "No insurance information was available under Whitmore." "My husband," Evelyn started, then stopped. What was there to say? "My husband threw me out like garbage and canceled my insurance while I was bleeding on a marble floor. Ms. Hayes, you experienced a placental abruption scare. The bleeding has stopped, and your baby appears to be healthy and stable. But you need rest, minimal stress, and careful monitoring for the remainder of your pregnancy. Any more incidents like this, and you risk premature labor, or worse. Can I stay? Evelyn asked. Just overnight? I don't have anywhere to go. The doctor's expression flickered with something that might have been compassion, quickly suppressed. Your insurance was terminated earlier this evening. Without coverage, we can stabilize you in the emergency room, but we cannot admit you to a standard room unless you can provide alternative payment. Alternative payment. As if Evelyn had access to anything at all. I don't have any money, she said quietly. My husband, he controls everything. He froze my accounts. I understand. The doctor made a note on her clipboard. We're going to transfer you to the charity ward. Social services will visit in the morning to discuss your options. The charity ward. 6 hours ago, Evelyn had been preparing for a baby shower at a restaurant where the appetizers cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Now she was being wheeled through the hospital's least maintained corridors, past walls that needed repainting, and floors that had been mopped with something that smelled like chemical resignation. The charity ward was a room with 4 beds, harsh fluorescent lights that never fully dimmed, and the kind of thin blankets that provided coverage without warmth. The smell of industrial cleaner barely masked something worse underneath, something human and desperate and enduring. Evelyn's bed was against the wall, no window, just a curtain that offered the illusion of privacy without any of the substance. In the bed next to hers, a woman sat reading a worn paperback, the spine cracked from countless readings. She was perhaps 64, 65, with silver gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. First night's the hardest, the woman said, without looking up from her book. After that, you just get numb. Evelyn did not respond. She curled around her belly, knees drawn up as much as her pregnant body would allow, trying to protect her child from a world that was trying to destroy them both. Her phone was nearly dead, 1% battery, just enough to check the notification she had been avoiding. Email from Richard's attorney. Subject line, time-sensitive agreement. Please find attached the proposed settlement. You have 48 hours to sign. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action regarding custody and mental health evaluation. Mr. Whitmore prefers to handle this quietly. Custody. Mental health evaluation. They were already positioning to take her baby. Another notification. A news alert from a gossip site she had never subscribed to, never even visited. Someone had added her to the distribution list. Headline: Whitmore wife's secret struggle. Sources say hedge fund heiress battled mental health issues for years. The article included photos of her at the baby shower from that afternoon, looking tired and overwhelmed. Quotes from anonymous friends describing erratic behavior and concerning episodes. A carefully constructed narrative that painted her as unstable, unpredictable, potentially dangerous. They were burying her before she could fight back. A text message appeared. From Sandra Coleman, her best friend, the woman who had held her hand at doctor's appointments, who had listened to her fears about motherhood, who had been the only person in her new life that Evelyn had truly trusted. Sandra: I'm sorry, Evie. They paid me. From the beginning. I was never really your friend. Please don't hate me. Evelyn stared at the screen until the words blurred and lost meaning. 3 years. Sandra had been watching her, reporting on her, feeding information to Carolyn Whitmore for 3 entire years. Every secret Evelyn had shared, every moment of vulnerability, every doubt and fear and hope, all of it had been collected and cataloged and weaponized against her. She had nothing left, no money, no home, no friends, no reputation, Nothing but a baby who had not asked to be born into this nightmare and a body that was failing her when she needed it most. Her phone died. In the darkness of the charity ward, surrounded by strangers, Evelyn finally broke. She cried without making a sound, tears sliding down her face and soaking into the thin hospital pillow. It was a skill she had learned early in her marriage, crying silently. Richard had always gotten angry when she cried too loudly. He said it was manipulative. He said it was a sign of her instability. She had believed him. For 3 years, she had believed every terrible thing he told her about herself. "Whatever you're running from," the woman in the next bed said softly, "or whoever's chasing you, it's not over yet. You're still breathing. So is that baby. That means you still have a chance." Evelyn did not respond, but she placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby shift and kick, stubbornly alive, stubbornly present. "I'm still here," she whispered. "We're still here." She lay awake all night, staring at the water-stained ceiling, making a decision that would change everything. At dawn, she asked the woman, Martha Jennings was her name, if she could borrow a phone charger. When her phone powered on, Evelyn opened a contact she had not touched in 7 years. A contact she had labeled, "Jonathan, do not call," as a reminder to herself to stay away, to maintain the walls she had built, to prove that she did not need anyone or anything from her old life. Jonathan Morgan, her oldest brother, the founder and CEO of Morgan Technologies, a fintech empire valued at $12 billion. The man she had told, 7 years ago at their parents' funeral, that she did not need his money, did not need his protection, did not need him. She had been 25 years old, angry and grieving, and convinced that she could build a better life on her own. A normal life, free from the suffocating weight of the Morgan family fortune. She had been so wrong. Her thumb hovered over the contact for a long moment. Pride is a luxury, she thought, one she could no longer afford. She typed 3 words, "I need help." She pressed send before she could change her mind. The response came in 11 seconds. Jonathan. "On my way. Don't move. Don't sign anything." Then a second message, almost immediately after. Jonathan. "I never stopped watching over you. Neither did William. We've been waiting for this call for 7 years. Evelyn stared at the screen, tears flowing freely now. She was not alone. She had never been alone. The transformation began at 7:15 the next morning. Evelyn had not slept. She was sitting on the edge of her bed in the charity ward, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, dried blood still staining her skirt, when the ward supervisor approached, with an expression of profound confusion. "Miss Hayes?" The supervisor checked her clipboard twice, as if expecting the information to change. "There's been some kind of mistake. You're being transferred." "Transferred where?" "To the Morrison wing. It's private. I can't afford—" "It's been handled." 2 nurses arrived with a wheelchair. Their demeanor had shifted completely from the night before. They were gentle now, almost deferential, handling Evelyn like she was made of something precious and breakable. As she was wheeled through the hospital, Evelyn watched her surroundings transform. The harsh fluorescent lights of the charity ward gave way to soft, recessed lighting. Industrial linoleum became polished hardwood. The smell of antiseptic and desperation faded into something clean and almost floral. The Morrison wing did not look like a hospital. It looked like a 5-star hotel that happened to have medical equipment. Her room was private. Enormous windows overlooked Central Park, the autumn leaves painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson. Fresh flowers filled every surface, their fragrance subtle and expensive. The bed looked like it could adjust to 16 different positions, and the private bathroom had marble finishes and heated floors. And sitting in the corner, In an armchair that probably cost more than a year's rent in most Manhattan apartments was a man she had not seen in 7 years. Jonathan Morgan stood when she entered. He was 42 now, with gray at the temples and deeper lines around his eyes than she remembered. But he had their father's face, their mother's quiet intensity, the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. He did not rush to her. He waited, letting her set the pace. That was Jonathan, always patient, always watching, always thinking 3 moves ahead. "How did you—" Evelyn started. "I told you," Jonathan said. "I never stopped watching." "That's creepy, Jonathan." "That's love. The kind that respects boundaries, but doesn't abandon." She wanted to be angry. She wanted to maintain the walls she had spent 7 years building, the independence she had sacrificed everything to achieve. But she was exhausted. She was pregnant. She was bleeding in a hospital gown while her husband systematically destroyed her life. "I said terrible things to you," she said quietly, "when I left. You were grieving. We all were. I said terrible things too. I told you I didn't need you. You were wrong." A pause stretched between them, filled with 7 years of silence and regret, and love that had never stopped, even when it hurt. Then, despite everything, Evelyn laughed. It was broken and tearful, more sob than laugh, but it was real. "I was very wrong." Jonathan crossed the room and took her hands. His grip was gentle but steady, an anchor in the storm. "I know what Richard did," he said. "I know what he's planning. And I need you to understand something, Evelyn." "What?" "This is not a fight he can win. He doesn't know who you are. He doesn't know who we are. And by the time he figures it out, it will be far too late." The door opened again. A nurse entered with fresh towels, then stopped short as another man breezes past her without so much as a glance. William Morgan was everything Jonathan was not. Where Jonathan was quiet and strategic, William was loud and flashy, moving through the world like it owed him a good time. His designer suit was perfectly tailored, his hair artfully disheveled, his smile the kind that could sell sand in a desert or ice in winter. "Evie." William crossed the room and hugged her before she could react, mindful of her belly, but fierce in his embrace. 7 years, Evelyn. 7 years of birthday cards, returned unopened. Do you have any idea how annoying it is to be rich and unable to buy your sister a present? William, I had to donate to charities in your name, like some kind of peasant. Despite everything, she laughed again. Fuller this time. William had always been able to make her laugh, even in the darkest moments. When they were children, she used to crawl into his bed during thunderstorms because he was the only one who could chase away her fear. Then William's expression changed. The charm fell away like a mask being removed, and what was underneath was cold and sharp and dangerous. "I saw the articles they planted," he said. "I saw the lobby footage." "There's footage?" Jonathan answered. "Every building, like the Carlisle, has security cameras in the lobby. George, the doorman, made sure a copy found its way to me." "Your husband," William continued, his voice low and controlled, "stepped around you like you were a piece of furniture while you were bleeding, carrying his child." His eyes met hers, and Evelyn saw something she had forgotten existed, the protective rage of a brother who would burn the world down for his family. "I've destroyed men for less." 3 hours later, the conference room on Evelyn's floor had been transformed into a command center. Laptops covered the table. Secure phone lines had been established. Documents were spread across every surface, organized with military precision into categories: legal, financial, media, personal. Jonathan Morgan sat at the head of the table, coordinating what he called information warfare. William was on his phone, speaking in rapid French to someone about acquiring debt portfolios. And at the far end of the table, Silver hair, perfectly styled, and sharp eyes, missing nothing, sat Victoria Ashford. Victoria was 58 years old and had been practicing law for longer than Evelyn had been alive. She was known in legal circles as the closer because she never lost a case she decided to take, and she only took cases that interested her. She had represented the Morgan family for decades. She had handled their parents' estate after the plane crash, and she had agreed to help Evelyn not for money, but because, as she put it, I owed your father a debt. Let's establish the battlefield, Victoria said, spreading documents across the table. Richard Whitmore believes he's fighting a pregnant woman with no resources, no connections, and a documented history of mental instability. Those psychiatric evaluations are fake, Evelyn said. Of course they are. The question is proving it. Victoria pulled out a folder. The evaluations are signed by a Dr. Harrison Wells. Lovely credentials on paper. One problem. Dr. Wells lost his license in 2019 for falsifying records. He now works as a private consultant for people who need documentation that cannot withstand scrutiny. So we discredit the evaluations, William said. That's defense. I want offense. Jonathan spoke without looking up from his laptop. Derek Paulson. Everyone turned to him. Richard's CFO, Jonathan continued. He's been with the Whitmore family for 15 years. He handles the things that cannot be handled publicly, the bribes, the payoffs, the women who need to disappear quietly. You know about Derek? Evelyn asked. I know about everyone in Richard's orbit. I've been watching him since you started dating. Jonathan! You renounced your family, Evelyn, not your protection. Victoria nodded approvingly. Derek Paulson is a pressure point. He has a daughter in college, same age as Richard's mistress, as a matter of fact. He's been expressing concerns about Richard's methods to his therapist. How do you know what he tells his therapist? William asked. Jonathan's expression did not change. I own the building where the therapist's office is located. Certain things become accessible. That's illegal, Evelyn said. That's leverage. There's a difference. Victoria laid out the strategy. They would let Richard believe he was winning. He was already overconfident, already overextended. They would give him room to make mistakes while quietly building the case that would destroy him. William would buy up Richard's debt. The Whitmore hedge fund had been struggling for years, bleeding money through bad investments and worse decisions. Richard was leveraged to the breaking point. When William called in those debts, the entire house of cards would collapse. Jonathan would work on Derek Paulson, not with threats, but with opportunity. A way out that did not involve going down with Richard's ship. Victoria would stall the legal proceedings, extensions, motions, demands for verification. Every document Richard had filed would be challenged, examined, and ultimately exposed as fraud. What about the media? Evelyn asked. The articles are everywhere. They're calling me unstable, saying I abandoned my family, implying I'm unfit to be a mother. William smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Richard used outlets that owe him favors. I own outlets that owe me favors. By next week, the narrative will be very different. For the first time since the lobby, Evelyn felt something other than despair. She felt the faint stirring of hope. But Victoria raised a hand. There's one complication, Caroline Whitmore. The room went quiet. Richard is the face of the family, Victoria continued. But Caroline is the brain. She's been running that family since her husband died 20 years ago. She's smarter than her son, more patient, and far more ruthless. If she realizes who you really are, Evelyn, she won't fight fair. She'll burn everything down to win. Then we don't let her find out, Evelyn said. Jonathan shook his head. Too late. He pulled up a report on his tablet. showing it to the room. Caroline had your friend Sandra Coleman surveilling you for 3 years. Sandra reported everything. Your vague answers about your family, your lack of contact with any relatives, the way you deflected questions about your past. Caroline found it suspicious. She hired an investigator last month. His preliminary report notes discrepancies in your background and recommends further investigation. So she knows? She suspects. She doesn't have confirmation yet, but she will. Soon. Victoria leaned forward. Then we need to move faster than planned. No, Evelyn said. Everyone looked at her. Let her find out. Let her tell Richard. Evelyn's voice was steady now, stronger than it had been since before the lobby. I want to see his face when he realizes who he threw away. William grinned, and it was the grin of a predator spotting wounded prey. There's the Evelyn I remember. 3 days later, the tide began to turn. The first signs appeared in the media. Headlines that had been uniformly hostile to Evelyn started shifting, questioning, probing. Questions emerge about psychiatric evaluations and Whitmore divorce. Read one article, anonymous source. Whitmore's evidence may be fabricated, announced another. Legal experts. Whitmore's strategy raises ethical concerns, declared a third. Tiffany Banks, who had stood in the lobby, wearing Evelyn's robe while she bled on the marble floor, watched her carefully curated Instagram empire crumble. Someone had leaked information that she had been Richard's mistress for 18 months before the separation. Her comment section transformed from adoring fans to furious critics practically overnight. Her girl boss brand was dying, one unfollow at a time. The legal front was moving too. Victoria had successfully argued that the emergency custody motion should be paused pending verification of the psychiatric documents. Judge Morrison, the silver-haired pillar of old money who was presiding over the case, had agreed to a 14-day continuance. 14 days. It was not a victory, but it was time. Time to gather evidence. Time to flip witnesses. Time to build the case that would destroy Richard Whitmore. William's financial warfare was proceeding exactly as planned. His network of shell companies had quietly acquired 40% of Richard's outstanding debt. Richard did not know yet. When he found out, when William called in those debts, the leverage that Richard had used to control everyone around him would become the noose around his own neck. And Derek Paulson was beginning to crack. Jonathan met with him at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from the glittering towers of Manhattan, where both men usually operated. No lawyers present, no recordings. At least none that Derek knew about. Just two men talking over mediocre coffee in a place where nobody would recognize either of them. You've worked for Richard for 15 years, Jonathan said. You've seen things, done things. How much longer can you carry that weight? Derek's hands shook as he lifted his cup. Are you wearing a wire? I don't need wires, Derek. I need witnesses. When this falls apart, and it will fall apart, you can either fall with him or step over to the side that wins. If I talk, I go to prison. If you don't talk, you go to prison anyway. Richard's already setting you up to take the blame. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice dropping. Did you really think those accounts in your name were bonuses? Derek went pale. I can protect you, Jonathan continued. I can protect your daughter, but I need everything. Every document, every transaction, every secret you've been keeping for 15 years. And I need it before this goes to trial. Derek stared at the table for a long moment. I need to think about it. Think fast. The clock is ticking. That night, Evelyn slept in a real bed for the first time since the lobby. Her brothers took turns sitting outside her door, not because she was in immediate danger, but because they had missed 7 years of being her family, and they were not going to miss any more. She woke in the middle of the night to find William asleep in the armchair, his laptop still open on his chest, having fallen asleep while working on her case. For a moment, she was 8 years old again, crawling into his bed during a thunderstorm because he was the only one who could make her laugh when she was scared. She pulled a blanket over him and went back to sleep. The next morning, Victoria called with good news. "The judge has ordered an independent psychiatric evaluation," she said, "by a real doctor, chosen by the court, not by Richard. If you pass, and you will pass, his entire custody case collapses. When? Next week. Just keep resting. Keep quiet. Let them think they're losing. Desperate people make mistakes." Evelyn hung up and looked out at Central Park. The trees were changing color, gold and crimson leaves falling in the autumn wind. Children were playing on the grass below. Life was continuing, indifferent to her personal catastrophe. For the first time since Richard had called her a placeholder, since he had stepped around her bleeding body like she was an obstacle, since her entire world had collapsed in the space of a single evening, Evelyn allowed herself to believe that she might actually win. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick against her palm. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise." She was wrong. 5 days later, Jonathan entered her hospital room without knocking. His face told her everything before he said a word. "What happened?" she asked. "Caroline Whitmore knows who you are." "I expected that. We planned for—" She told Richard 3 hours ago. He didn't take it well. Jonathan handed her a tablet. A new article was loading on the screen. Morgan Heiress, revealed pregnant woman in Whitmore divorce, is secret billionaire. "That's what we wanted, isn't it?" Evelyn said. "For people to know he threw away—" "Keep reading." The article continued, and with every sentence, Evelyn felt her fragile hope crumbling. Sources close to the family reveal that Evelyn Morgan, who changed her name to Hayes 7 years ago, has a history of erratic behavior stemming from her parents' tragic death. She had a complete breakdown, a source claims. She cut off her family, abandoned her inheritance, and disappeared. The psychiatric issues documented in the divorce are clearly part of a larger pattern. They had taken her past, her grief, her desperate attempt to build a normal life, and twisted it into evidence of her instability. Every choice she had made to protect herself was now being used to destroy her. "They're using my history against me," she said. "The real story, just twisted." It gets worse. Jonathan swiped to another headline. Morgan brothers accused of intimidation. Whitmore's lawyers claim billionaire siblings threatened witnesses. That's not true. Doesn't matter. They're filing an emergency motion claiming witness tampering. They want the case moved to a different jurisdiction with a judge they control. Victoria's voice came through the speakerphone on Jonathan's tablet. They're also requesting immediate protective custody of the unborn child. They're claiming you're a flight risk, that your billionaire brothers might help you disappear with the baby. That's insane. Welcome to the Whitmore playbook. When you can't win on facts, bury them in motions. The emergency hearing was set for that afternoon. Evelyn entered the courtroom with Victoria at her side. Jonathan and William stayed outside because their presence would only prove the intimidation narrative. She had to face Richard and Caroline alone. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators, all of them watching as Evelyn made her way to the front. Richard and Caroline sat together at the opposite table, a united front of old money respectability. Richard wore a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of dignified concern. Caroline wore pearls and the satisfied smile of a woman who had been winning battles like this for 40 years. Judge Robert Morrison presided from the bench, silver-haired and impeccably connected to every powerful family in Manhattan. He had been a guest at Whitmore parties. He had attended the same prep school as Richard's father. He was not, Evelyn realized with sinking certainty, going to be impartial. Victoria argued brilliantly. She dismantled the witness tampering claims with surgical precision. She pointed out the fabricated psychiatric records, the unlicensed doctor who had signed them, the payments to Sandra Coleman that proved the friendship had been manufactured from the start. She presented evidence of Richard's affair, his financial manipulations, his deliberate cruelty on the night he threw his pregnant wife out into the cold. Judge Morrison listened with a neutral expression that did not change throughout the entire presentation. When Richard's lawyer spoke, he presented something new, a sworn statement from Sandra Coleman. Miss Coleman has known Mrs. Morgan Hayes for 3 years, the lawyer said. In that time, she observed numerous instances of concerning behavior, mood swings, paranoid accusations, emotional instability. She's prepared to testify that Mrs. Morgan Hayes once confided she was not sure she could handle being a mother and sometimes wished the pregnancy had never happened. That's a lie, Evelyn whispered to Victoria. That's completely not now, Victoria hissed back. The judge nodded thoughtfully, as if Sandra Coleman's fabricated testimony was the most reasonable thing he had heard all day. Given the serious nature of these allegations, Judge Morrison said, and the complexity introduced by the involvement of the Morgan family fortune, I'm inclined to grant temporary protective custody to Mr. Whitmore, pending a full hearing. The courtroom erupted. Evelyn could not breathe. Your Honor, Victoria said, her voice sharp with barely controlled outrage, my client is 8 months pregnant. You're suggesting that the moment she gives birth, her child should be taken. I'm suggesting that the child's welfare must be the primary concern. Mr. Whitmore has demonstrated stability. Mrs. Morgan Hayes has demonstrated unpredictability. The gavel fell. Temporary protective custody granted to Richard Whitmore. When Evelyn gave birth, the baby would be taken from her arms and given to the man who had thrown her out in the cold. Richard walked past her, on his way out of the courtroom. He paused, leaned close, his voice a whisper, meant only for her. You thought having billionaire brothers made you untouchable? My family has been destroying people like yours for generations. Money can't buy breeding, Evelyn, and it can't buy judges. He walked away. Carolyn followed, but she stopped to look at Evelyn directly. I knew there was something off about you from the beginning, Caroline said. A real nobody wouldn't have been so careful about hiding her past. You played a role for 3 years. But this is real life, dear. And in real life, the Whitmores always win. They left together, mother and son, confident and victorious. When Jonathan and William rushed to her side, Evelyn could barely speak. He's going to take my baby, she said. The moment I give birth, he's going to take my baby. William's expression went terrifyingly blank. The charm was gone. The jokes were gone. What remained was something cold and hard and absolutely certain. No, he said. He's not. The war room that night felt different. The energy that had crackled with hope and possibility just days before had transformed into something heavier, desperate. Victoria paced by the window, her usual composure showing cracks. The ruling is temporary, but temporary could mean weeks. If Evelyn goes into labor before we get it overturned, then we make sure she doesn't go into labor, Jonathan interrupted. That's not how pregnancy works, Jonathan, Evelyn said quietly. We could move you, William said, out of the country, somewhere they can't reach. Victoria shook her head. If she runs, she loses all legal standing. Richard gets permanent custody by default. The only way to win this is to win it here, in court, on the record. Then we destroy the judge, Jonathan said. He's dirty. Everyone's dirty at that level. We have 2 weeks, maybe 3. The Whitmores have had decades to buy their infrastructure. We can't outspend them in that time. We need something else. Silence fell over the room, the kind of silence that comes when brilliant people run out of brilliant ideas. Then Evelyn spoke, her voice hollow but determined. Derek. Jonathan looked at her. Derek went dark after the hearing. He's scared. Find him, whatever it takes. He's the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. Jonathan's team located Derek Paulson at a motel in New Jersey, a sad little place with flickering neon and the kind of anonymity that came from being forgettable. He had been drinking. Bottles littered the small room. His hands shook when he let Jonathan in. They know I was talking to you, Derek said. Caroline knows everything. She told me if I cooperate with you, my daughter loses her scholarship. If I keep talking, she loses more than that. I can protect her, Jonathan said. You can't protect her from them. Derek's voice cracked with fear and exhaustion. You don't understand. This isn't the first time they've done this. Richard had a girl before, 5 years ago. She got pregnant. She threatened to go public. They didn't just take the baby. They destroyed her, completely. She's in an institution now, what's left of her. Jonathan absorbed this information without visible reaction. Then help me stop them. For her, for my sister, for your daughter. Derek broke down. 15 years of secrets and compromises and moral corrosion came pouring out in ugly, heaving sobs. I have files, he finally said. Everything. 20 years of cover-ups, bribes, threats, disappearances. But if I give them to you and we lose, I'm dead. My daughter's dead. You understand? I understand. Jonathan's voice was calm, but certain. And I promise you, we won't lose. The files were everything Jonathan had hoped for and more. 2 decades of Whitmore family corruption documented in meticulous detail. Bribes to judges, including the $300,000 that had found its way to Judge Morrison through his wife's consulting firm just last month. Payments to journalists, threats to witnesses, a pattern of predatory behavior that would be enough to bring down an empire. But they needed more. They needed testimony, and that meant they needed someone else to break. 1 week later, a nurse announced a visitor to Evelyn's hospital room. She says her name is Tiffany Banks. She says it's urgent. Evelyn's first instinct was rage. This was the woman who had stood in the lobby wearing her robe while she bled on the floor. The woman who had called herself the mother of Richard's first real child. The woman who had smiled while Evelyn's world collapsed. But something in the nurse's tone made her pause. Let her in. Tiffany entered, and Evelyn barely recognized her. The polished Instagram influencer was gone. No makeup, hair unwashed, eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked like a woman who had finally seen something she could not unsee. If Richard sent you, Evelyn started. Richard doesn't know I'm here. Caroline definitely doesn't. Then why? Tiffany finally met her eyes. Because I'm pregnant too, and I just found out I'm not having a baby. I'm having a replacement heir. She pulled a document from her purse with trembling hands. I signed this 6 months ago. He told me it was standard, prenatal agreement, protection for the child. Evelyn read the document, and her hands started shaking too. It was titled Reproductive Services Agreement. Tiffany had agreed to carry Richard's child and, upon birth, surrender full custody in exchange for $2 million. She agreed to have no future contact with the child. She agreed to remain silent about the arrangement permanently. You sold your baby, Evelyn said. I didn't know what I was signing, Tiffany's voice broke. I thought it was just, I thought he loved me. I thought I was going to be his wife. And now? Now I'm 3 weeks from delivery, and Caroline informed me that I'll be recovering at a facility upstate. No visitors, no phone, just a check and a plane ticket to anywhere that isn't here. She was crying now, ugly, genuine crying that stripped away every pretense she had ever worn. I helped him destroy you, Tiffany said. I stood in that lobby and watched you bleed. I've done terrible things, but I can't just hand over my baby like it's a transaction. What do you want from me? I want to help you stop him. I have things, recordings, messages, things he said when he thought I was too stupid to understand. Evelyn stared at this woman she had hated, now broken and desperate and seeking redemption in the only way she knew how. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. But ask yourself, if Caroline was willing to do this to me, the mother of Richard's heir, what do you think she'll do to you? The war room reconvened 48 hours later with new energy. They had 3 sources now. Derek's files documenting 20 years of Whitmore corruption, Tiffany's recordings of Richard discussing his plans in explicit detail. Digital evidence Jonathan's team had extracted from Whitmore servers through methods that were legally questionable but devastatingly effective. Here's what we have, Victoria said, laying it all out. Financial fraud. Richard has been skimming from the family foundation for years. Witness tampering. We have records of payments to Sandra Coleman and Dr. Harrison Wells. Bribery. Judge Morrison received $300,000 through his wife's consulting firm last month. That's enough to destroy him, William said, in a fair court. But we're not in a fair court. Morrison is still the presiding judge. If we present this evidence, he'll suppress it. He has to. His own freedom depends on Richard winning. Then we take it out of his hands, Jonathan said. How? Federal jurisdiction. Financial crimes cross state lines. If we can get the FBI interested, Morrison loses control. How do we get the FBI interested? Jonathan looked at William. You have a contact, someone who owes you a significant favor. William smiled. Senator Margaret Crawford. She chairs the banking committee. She's been looking for a high-profile financial crimes case to boost her profile before the next election cycle. You want to turn this into a federal investigation? I want to turn this into a federal investigation that's announced on live television. Let's see Richard spin his way out of that. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Evelyn was in her hospital bed, trying to eat breakfast despite having no appetite, when CNN broke in with breaking news. FBI raids Whitmore family offices. She watched, transfixed, as federal agents swarmed the gleaming hedge fund headquarters that bore Richard's name. Men in blue windbreakers carried boxes of documents past windows that had once looked down on the city with smug superiority. Richard was photographed being escorted to a waiting SUV. Not in handcuffs yet, but clearly no longer in control. The charges scrolled across the bottom of the screen: wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, witness tampering in a civil case, and the crucial one, obstruction of justice through bribery of a sitting judge. Judge Morrison recused himself within the hour. He would face his own investigation in the weeks to come. The temporary custody order was suspended pending the assignment of a new judge. Jonathan and William were with her when the news broke. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just watched as Richard's empire collapsed in real time, broadcast to the entire nation. Derek held up his end, William finally said. So did Tiffany, Jonathan added. Her recordings were the key to establishing intent. Evelyn closed her eyes. For a moment, just a moment, she let herself believe it was over. "What happens now?" she asked. Victoria's voice came through the speakerphone. "New judge gets assigned, probably within 48 hours. Given the circumstances, emergency custody will almost certainly be returned to you. Richard's case is destroyed. We won," William said. "Caroline's still out there," Jonathan noted. "Caroline is a 71-year-old woman whose son just got arrested on federal charges. She's finished." For once, Jonathan did not argue. That night, for the first time in weeks, Evelyn ate a full meal. She laughed at William's jokes. She let Jonathan fuss over her. Like a protective older brother should, she called her unborn son by the name she had chosen, Daniel, after their father. "We made it, Daniel," she whispered, her hands on her belly. "We're going to be okay." She fell asleep peacefully. She was wrong. The pain woke her at 3 in the morning, sharp, urgent, different from anything she had felt before. Contractions. Real ones this time, strong and close together. "No," she whispered into the darkness. "No, no, no. It's too soon. I have 2 more weeks." She pressed the call button. No response. The pain intensified. Something was wrong. More wrong than just early labor. She tried to reach for her phone on the nightstand. It was not there. The door opened. A nurse entered, but not one Evelyn recognized. "Mrs. Whitmore, let's get you to delivery." "I'm not... That's not my name." "Where's my doctor?" "Everything's being taken care of." 2 more people entered. A wheelchair appeared. "Wait. What's happening? I need my brothers. They've been notified. Now please, we need to move you." Something was very, very wrong. They wheeled her out of her private room, down a service corridor she had never seen before, toward an elevator, marked staff only. "Where are you taking me? This isn't the way to maternity." A voice came from the shadows. Familiar. Cold. Triumphant. "Of course it isn't." Caroline Whitmore stepped into the light. She looked immaculate, even at 3 in the morning. Perfect silver hair, perfect pearl earrings, perfect posture of a woman who had never lost a battle in her life. "Did you think I'd let your brothers win?" Caroline asked. "Did you think I'd let you destroy my family and walk away with my grandson? This is kidnapping. You can't... I can do whatever I want. I've done it for 40 years. Your brothers may have money, but they don't understand what real power is. Real power is having people in every hospital, every courthouse, every police precinct, who owe you favors." The elevator doors opened. "You're going to deliver this baby in a private facility," Caroline continued. "The paperwork will show you had a mental breakdown during labor. You attacked the staff. You were sedated for your own safety. The baby, tragically, needed to be placed in protective custody immediately. My brothers will find me," Caroline smiled. "Your brothers will find a hysterical woman claiming conspiracy theories about a respected family. Who do you think people will believe?" The contractions were coming faster now. The pain was overwhelming, but through it, Evelyn felt something else rising. Not fear, fury. "Help!" she screamed. "Somebody help me!" Caroline nodded to the fake nurse, who produced a syringe. "Don't worry," Caroline said. "You won't remember any of this." The needle approached Evelyn's arm. This was it. She was going to lose her baby. She was going to lose her mind. Everything she had fought for. Everything her brothers had sacrificed. None of it mattered because Caroline Whitmore had people everywhere. She closed her eyes, and then a voice cut through the darkness. "Federal agents, nobody move." The corridor exploded with light and sound. Men in FBI windbreakers poured out of doorways. Someone tackled the fake nurse, someone else restrained the orderlies, and standing at the center of the chaos, flanked by agents, looking like avenging angels in their suits, were Jonathan Morgan and William Morgan. Jonathan reached Evelyn first. "I told you," he said, his voice steady, even as chaos swirled around them. I never stopped watching. How? Your room has 3 cameras. I installed myself. When you disappeared from the feed, I had agents here in 4 minutes. William approached Caroline, who was being handcuffed by 2 federal agents. Real power, you said? William's voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Let me tell you about real power. Real power is having the FBI director's personal cell phone number. Caroline's face contorted with rage. You think you've won? The Whitmores have survived worse than this. My son will be out in 5 years, and when he is... Your son just lost his plea deal. The DA added kidnapping charges 10 minutes ago. He's looking at 25 years now. For the first time, Caroline's composure cracked. Fear flickered across her features, quickly suppressed but undeniably present. And you, William continued, you're 71 years old. You'll die in prison. Evelyn gasped. The contractions were unbearable now. The baby, she said. The baby's coming. Jonathan did not hesitate. He lifted her himself, cradling her carefully, and carried her toward the real maternity ward, barking orders at medical staff who scrambled to obey. You're safe now, he said. I promise. You're safe. The delivery room was chaos-controlled. Medical staff surrounded Evelyn, monitoring her vitals, preparing for a delivery that was coming whether anyone was ready or not. The stress had pushed her body past its limits. The baby was not waiting for a more convenient time. Jonathan and William stood outside the door, refused entry to the delivery room, but refusing to leave the hallway. Victoria was on the phone, coordinating the legal aftermath of Caroline's arrest. FBI agents had secured the floor, ensuring no more Whitmore loyalists could interfere. 8 hours of labor, 8 hours of pain and fear and exhaustion, but Evelyn was not alone. For the first time in 7 years, she was surrounded by people who loved her, who would fight for her, who would never let her fall again. At 2:23 in the afternoon, Daniel Jonathan Morgan Hayes came into the world. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes. A healthy cry that filled the room and spilled out into the hallway where 2 billionaires stood waiting, with tears streaming down their faces. The doctor placed him on Evelyn's chest, and she wept. Hi, baby, she whispered. Hi, Daniel. I'm your mom. I've been waiting so long to meet you. Jonathan and William were allowed in moments later. They stood at the foot of the bed, these 2 titans of industry, these men who commanded empires and destroyed rivals without hesitation, and they cried like children. He's beautiful, William said. He has Dad's nose, Jonathan observed. He has Mom's eyes, Evelyn added. For a moment, they were not billionaires or business moguls or warriors locked in battle with a corrupt dynasty. They were just siblings, just a family that had lost their parents too soon, that had broken apart in their grief, that had found their way back to each other through fire. I'm sorry we weren't there for you, William said. For 7 years. I'm sorry I pushed you away, Evelyn replied. None of that matters now, Jonathan said. What matters is this. He gestured to Daniel, sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. What matters is that he's safe, that you're safe, that we're together. The Morgan family had been shattered by grief and pride and the impossible weight of expectations. Now, in a hospital room overlooking Central Park, with a newborn baby as evidence of survival and hope, they began to heal. The trials took months. Richard Whitmore III faced 17 federal counts: wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. Each charge was documented with meticulous evidence, testimony from Derek Paulson and Tiffany Banks, recordings and financial records that left no room for doubt. His lawyers tried everything: motions to dismiss, claims of prosecutorial misconduct, arguments that the evidence had been obtained illegally. The judge, a no-nonsense woman from Brooklyn who had no connections to old money Manhattan, rejected them all. Richard took the stand in his own defense. It was a mistake. Under cross-examination, his arrogance emerged despite his lawyer's coaching. He could not help himself. He sneered at questions about his treatment of Evelyn. He dismissed the testimony of women he had used and discarded. He implied that the court simply did not understand how things worked at his level of society. The jury understood perfectly. Guilty on all 17 counts. The sentencing hearing was standing room only. Media from around the world covered the fall of the Whitmore dynasty, the exposure of corruption that had festered in the upper echelons of society for generations. Richard stood before the judge in a suit that no longer looked quite as tailored. His confidence finally cracked, his empire in ruins around him. 22 years in federal prison. He looked back at Evelyn as he was led away. His eyes still held that familiar contempt, but underneath it now was something new. Fear. Understanding. The dawning realization that he had stepped around the wrong woman on that marble lobby floor. Caroline Whitmore's trial was shorter, but no less devastating. Kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted assault. The evidence of her 3 in the morning plot was irrefutable. Multiple witnesses, security camera footage from Jonathan's hidden cameras, the testimony of the fake nurse and orderlies who had been more than willing to turn on their employer to save themselves. At 71 years old, facing 15 years in federal prison, Caroline Whitmore finally lost her composure entirely. "Do you have any idea who I am?" she screamed at the judge. "Do you know what my family has done for this city, for this country?" The judge, unmoved, sentenced her to the maximum. Caroline Whitmore died of a stroke 3 months into her sentence. She was alone in a prison medical ward, surrounded by indifferent staff who did not know or care about the society galas she had hosted, or the politicians she had courted, or the lives she had destroyed. Her obituary in the New York Times was 3 paragraphs long. It mentioned her charitable work and her family legacy. It did not mention Evelyn. It did not mention the baby she had tried to steal. Some victories are private. Judge Robert Morrison was impeached and disbarred. The investigation into his conduct revealed decades of corruption. Bribes taken not just from the Whitmores, but from countless other wealthy families who had learned that justice was for sale in his courtroom. His wife filed for divorce the day after his arrest. Derek Paulson served 18 months in a minimum security facility in exchange for his testimony. His daughter graduated from college with honors. He sends Evelyn a letter every Christmas, thanking her for giving him a second chance, for allowing him to finally become the man his daughter deserved. Sandra Coleman fled to Europe to avoid subpoena. She was last seen working at a hotel in Prague under a different name, living the small life she had earned through her betrayals. Evelyn does not think about her much. Tiffany Banks gave birth to a daughter 2 weeks after Evelyn. She kept the baby. She is in therapy, working through the trauma of what she participated in and what was almost done to her. She and Evelyn are not friends, but they exchange photos of the children sometimes. Half-siblings deserve to know each other, even if their parents can never be close. 6 months after the trials ended, Evelyn moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn. It was modest by Morgan standards. 4 bedrooms, a small garden and back, a neighborhood where people knew their neighbors' names, and nobody cared about old money, or new money, or any money at all. She bought it herself. With funds from a trust she had finally agreed to accept, the inheritance she had walked away from, 7 years ago when she thought she could escape her family by becoming someone else. She works 3 days a week now as an interior design consultant. Not because she needs the money, but because she needs the purpose, the connection to a life that exists outside the drama and the trauma and the endless recovery. The rest of the time, she is Daniel's mom. Jonathan moved his primary residence from Seattle to New York. He claims it is for business. Something about expanding Morgan Technologies' presence on the East Coast. New partnerships with financial institutions, the usual corporate explanations. Everyone knows the truth. He moved to be closer to his nephew. He stops by the brownstone most evenings, always with some excuse, dropping off documents Evelyn needs to sign, checking on a security system upgrade, bringing dinner because he happened to pass by this restaurant that Daniel might like in 15 years when he can actually eat solid food. He is learning to be an uncle. He is not very good at it yet. Too serious, too careful, too afraid of breaking something so small and precious. But he is trying. And that is everything. William kept his base in London, but visits every month without fail. He has taught Daniel 3 words of Italian, which Daniel cannot actually say yet because he is 6 months old, but William insists that babies absorb language unconsciously, and his nephew will thank him someday. He is also teaching Daniel about art, which consists of holding up pictures of famous paintings and providing commentary that Daniel ignores in favor of trying to eat his own feet. William considers this a form of artistic critique and respects the honesty. The Morgan Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention launched on the anniversary of the night Evelyn was thrown out of the Carlisle. It provides legal support, housing assistance, and counseling for women escaping abusive situations. In its first year, it helped over 15,000 women find safety. Evelyn does not run the foundation herself. She learned painfully that she cannot save everyone, but she sits on the board. She reviews cases. She speaks at events when she has the strength, telling her story so that other women know they are not alone. She has also started writing, a memoir, maybe, or perhaps a novel. She is not sure yet what form the story will take, but the words are finally coming. The truth of what happened and how she survived, the lessons she learned about family and pride, and the courage it takes to ask for help. Martha Jennings, the woman from the charity ward, is no longer homeless. The Morgan Foundation paid off her medical debt and helped her find an apartment. She visits Evelyn sometimes, bringing homemade cookies and wisdom earned through decades of struggle and survival. "You know what I learned?" Martha said during her last visit, holding Daniel while Evelyn made tea. "Rich or poor, famous or forgotten, we all end up in the same place eventually. The only thing that matters is who walks beside us on the way." William made good on his promise about the Carlisle. He purchased the building through a series of shell companies, outbidding 3 international investors and 1 Saudi prince. The previous owners were happy to sell. The Whitmore scandal had made the address toxic, and property values were dropping fast. He did not rename it. He did not tear it down. Instead, he donated the penthouse, the $47 million apartment where Evelyn had lived for 3 years, where she had believed she was building a life, where she had discovered the truth about her husband and her friend and everything she thought she knew. The penthouse is now emergency housing for women escaping domestic abuse. It can accommodate 3 families at a time, providing them with safety and security while they rebuild their lives. The plaque on the door reads, "The Evelyn Morgan Hayes Shelter, because everyone deserves a safe place to fall." Evelyn cried when she saw it. She cried harder when she met the first family to stay there. A mother with 2 children who had escaped a situation eerily similar to her own: wealthy husband, sophisticated abuse, everyone believing his version of events. "I thought no one would help me," the woman said. "I thought I was alone." "You're not," Evelyn told her. "You never were." A perfect autumn day in Central Park. The trees are golden and crimson, dropping leaves that crunch underfoot and pile in drifts along the pathways. The sky is that particular shade of blue that only exists in October, clear and bright and full of possibility. Evelyn walks through the park with Daniel in a stroller. He is awake today, which is unusual for this time of afternoon, his eyes wide as he takes in the colors and sounds and movements of the world around him. He has his grandmother's eyes, Evelyn's mother, a woman he will never meet, but whose legacy lives on in every breath he takes. Jonathan and William walk beside her, arguing about something pointless. Baseball teams. The best pizza in Brooklyn. Who? Daniel smiled at first, and whether it was a real smile or just gas, they are brothers again, not the cold, calculating men who had scared Evelyn at their parents' funeral, fighting over assets and legacy and control, just brothers, siblings who love each other and annoy each other and would die for each other without hesitation. They pass a playground. Children are laughing, climbing, swinging, living the uncomplicated joys of childhood that Evelyn wants so desperately to give her son. Parents watch from benches, some chatting, some scrolling through phones, all of them present in that particular way parents are present, aware of their children, even when they are not looking directly at them. The Morgan siblings stop at a bench overlooking the great lawn. Evelyn lifts Daniel from the stroller and holds him close, breathing in his baby smell, feeling his warmth against her chest. "You know what I keep thinking about?" William says. "What?" "That night in the lobby. Richard said you were a placeholder, someone temporary until he found someone better." Evelyn remembers. She will always remember the marble floor, the blood, the way he stepped around her like she was an obstacle in his path. "He was right about one thing," William continues. "You were temporary in his life, but he was temporary in yours. And now he's spending the next 20 years in a cell, and you're here, in the sunlight, with your son, with us." Jonathan speaks, his voice quiet but certain. He thought he was the main character in this story. Turns out he was just the villain in yours. Evelyn looks at her brothers, at her son, at the life she never expected to have, built from the ashes of the life she thought she wanted. "Do you know what Mom used to say?" she asks. "When we were kids and something went wrong?" "This too shall pass," Jonathan answers. "No, the other one." William smiles, and it is the smile of the brother she remembers from childhood, before grief and money and pride complicated everything. Morgans don't break. We bend, and then we snap back twice as strong. "I spent 7 years trying not to be a Morgan," Evelyn says. "Trying to be normal, trying to prove I didn't need any of you." "And now?" Jonathan asks. She looks at Daniel. He is staring up at her with those familiar eyes, completely unaware of what his arrival cost, what his existence means, how many people fought so he could be here in her arms. He does not know about the lobby, or the charity ward, or the courthouse, or the 3 a.m. kidnapping attempt. He does not know that his mother almost lost everything, including him. All he knows is that he is loved, and that is enough. "Yeah, now I know who I am," Evelyn says. "I'm a Morgan. I'm a mother, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She stands, settling Daniel against her shoulder. "Come on, let's go home." The 3 of them walk toward the park exit. Jonathan pushes the stroller, now empty, his usual serious expression softened by something that might be contentment. William makes faces at Daniel, trying to coax out another smile, narrating his efforts in a ridiculous voice that makes Evelyn laugh. At the edge of the park, Evelyn pauses and looks back. Somewhere in this city, there is a marble lobby where her old life ended. She can still feel it sometimes, the cold floor against her knees, the warmth of blood spreading beneath her, the sound of the door closing as her husband walked away. That night will always be part of her story, but it is not the ending. Somewhere else in this city, there is a brownstone in Brooklyn where her new life is waiting. A home she chose for herself. A career she built with her own hands. A family that came back to her when she finally found the courage to ask. She turns away from the park and walks toward the future. Behind her, the autumn sun casts long shadows across the grass, and the leaves continue to fall. And the city continues to move, indifferent and eternal. But Evelyn Morgan Hayes is not indifferent. She is alive, she is loved, she is free, and she is going home. The brownstone is warm when they arrive, late afternoon light streaming through the windows. The smell of something good, cooking, because Jonathan had the foresight to arrange for a catering delivery that he will pretend he did not arrange. They eat together at the kitchen table, Daniel in his high chair, gumming a soft toy, the adults passing dishes and sharing stories and laughing at jokes that are not particularly funny, but are funny anyway because they are together. After dinner, Jonathan insists on doing the dishes, despite having never done dishes in his life. William puts on music, some Italian opera, that he claims will expand Daniel's cultural horizons, and sweeps Evelyn into an impromptu dance around the living room. "You're ridiculous," she tells him. "I prefer eccentric. It sounds more expensive." Later, after Jonathan has left for his apartment and William has retired to the guest room he has started calling his room, Evelyn sits in the nursery with Daniel. The room is painted soft green, decorated with animals and clouds and all the gentle imagery of childhood. A mobile turns slowly above the crib, casting shadows that dance across the walls. Outside, the city hums its eternal song, but in here, everything is quiet and still and safe. She rocks Daniel slowly, singing a lullaby her mother used to sing, words she had forgotten until they came back to her in this room, in this moment, with this child who carries so much history in his tiny body. "You're going to grow up loved," she tells him. "You're going to know your uncles and your grandparents through stories and pictures. You're going to learn that family is not just blood, but choice. And you're going to understand that asking for help is not weakness, it's strength." Daniel's eyes are closing, his breathing slowing, his small body relaxing into sleep. "Your father made mistakes that will cost him decades of his life," Evelyn continues, her voice soft. "I hope someday you can forgive him. I hope someday I can too. But that's not today. Today it's enough that we're here, that we survived, that we found our way home." She places him gently in the crib, watching as he settles into sleep, peaceful and untroubled by the storms that raged around his arrival. At the window, she looks out at Brooklyn, at the lights of the city she chose, at the life she built from the ruins of the life she lost. She is 32 years old. She has a son and 2 brothers and a home and a purpose. She has scars that will never fully heal and memories that will never fully fade. She has learned that pride is a luxury and love is a necessity and family is whatever you make it. She is Evelyn Morgan Hayes, and she is exactly where she is supposed to be. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.